good morning, good evening, wherever you are around the world. Welcome to the Safe Space Between Us. I'm your host, Kieran. We're here today with a special guest, Jeremy, and my co-host, Kerry. Kerry, how are you?
I'm really good, thank you. Lovely to see everybody. Hope you're okay too.
I'm brilliant, thank you. And Jeremy, how are you, mate?
I'm very well, thank you so much. That's a great introduction, by the way. I made me feel quite emotional. I'll explain about that, why that is as the podcast unfolds.
It does. It hits me all the time. And to be fair, we add to that introduction week in, week out with requests. I believe remembering people gone through so much suicide, ill health, etc. We should remember their legacy. But today is about you, Jeremy, and your story and the brilliant movement that you're doing as well. So we want to focus on that today. So Jeremy, obviously your name's Jeremy, just tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're from, and then we can get started to the story, mate.
Incredible. So I am a content creator online, mostly creating content around child sexual abuse prevention is what it all seems to funnel into. And my aim with this is to try to make a conversation and a subject that is so uncomfortable for us all to look at, listen to, watch. I want to turn it into something that's engaging, that leaves the viewer wanting to know more, leaves the viewer interested in finding out, oh, what's that about? Oh, I wouldn't mind hearing a little, that was really interesting. Because if we continue to keep turning away from this topic through its horrific nature, then we're not going to solve the problem of it, and we're not going to get anywhere to reducing it continuing to happen like everywhere. So that's my big aim. I am trying to do that through video and written word, and using social media, using YouTube, using podcasts. And most recently, I've now managed to break into presenting in front of live audiences. So I managed to do that. Actually, I got an opportunity at the end of last year, which kind of kicked it off. And then at the start of this year, the ball started rolling. Foster care companies are extremely interested. Social worker agencies, councils, also interested, and most recently schools. And schools has been the big one for me, was always one of these big aims for when I started this work 4.5 years ago. I've been knocking on their door for many, many years, actually, probably 2 to 3 years. And it was February early this year that a school in Surrey gave me a chance. And I mean, we can talk about that in more detail as we go. And now I've managed to break into getting in front of young people to deliver this topic. So I'm just trying to get it on everybody's table. And actually, my target is to get it onto people's table who have never really thought about it before. Because I reckon if you ask every member of public, they all know that it happens. Maybe they don't know the scale of it, but they all know that it happens. Nobody says it doesn't happen at all. But even though people know that it happens and it's like the most horrific crime that we have going on in our societies, people don't really engage with it or pay any attention to it, or because it's so horrific in nature. You know, the sexual abuse of a child, the exploitation of a child's body for someone's perverse fantasy. Like, it's so terrible for us to even think about. So if I can try and turn that on its head and get people more interested in it and get this on everybody's table, I believe that's going to be a good thing. And I believe that's a good thing to do with the story that I have of child sexual abuse.
Yeah, and I just want to say well done and congratulate you succeeding in what you've done so far and getting into schools, because that's one thing I'm trying around here as well. So congratulations, well done to that. So let's start with your story then, Jeremy. So take us back, and I just want to let the listeners know if you feel anything that hits you or upsets you, please do seek support. You can message us and we can direct you, or there is emergency contact numbers on our Facebook page at Safe Space Between Us. But today, Jeremy, take us back when it all started for you.
So it was when I was 8 years old, happened in my home. The man that did it was a family friend, I'd say. Not actually like blood connection, but he was from the same country that my parents are from, Sri Lanka. He was trusted. He was a nurse. My dad was a doctor. They worked in the same hospital. We needed a little bit of help with childcare. You know, parents were working all hours under the sun. Dad's job as a doctor was extremely demanding. He'd need to be called out to see patients at the drop of a hat. So this guy, he was a student nurse, 25 years old, and he came on the scene and helped us out. And there was nothing wrong to everyone on the outside, but he took a liking to me and he really went for it. And that's when the sexual abuse was started, and it lasted for 2 years. He moved away. He must have qualified, I believe, moved town, stopped coming round. I didn't really think anything of it. Now, you know, people are so confused, understandably so. How did this go on for 2 years without anyone knowing? Like, the secrecy around it is phenomenal.
Yeah.
It's so tight. Like, it's a tight lock secret. Children are brilliant at keeping secrets from adults. You know, they'll do that for the whole of their life, and they're very clever at doing it. And also when they've been taught to do it, when they've been tricked, manipulated into doing it. And this would happen when my parents were out of the house. It would happen in my room. And the next level of confusion from the general public that I'm seeing in my experience doing this work is, well, why didn't you say anything at the time?
It's always blaming the victim, isn't it? That's the thing. It happens all the time, doesn't it?
They can't understand it because they are under the impression that child sexual abuse in all cases is violent, is forceful, is hurting the child physically. They're disturbed. Their life is in absolute turmoil through this experience. But I wasn't having any of that. None of it was forceful. None of it was violent. In fact, it was very gentle. Lots of fondling, lots of cuddling, lots of touching. And I was 8 years old in 1993. Children are very different today, right? They live in the world of the internet. First of all, you know, music lyrics are all about who's the baddest in bed. Like, sex is all over the music lyrics. They follow YouTubers on that platform who are in their 20s talking about one-nighters. Like, it's everywhere now. Sex is everywhere. Young kids are a lot more aware. And in addition to that, there's conversations being had in homes, and there are conversations being had in schools. In fact, schools are doing a phenomenal job now with education. We didn't have any of that. We didn't know what abuse was. We didn't really understand what sex was at 8 years old. We didn't know what body awareness was. We didn't know what consent was. We knew none of that.
Exactly.
So really, I was a fantastic target for him. It was easy. Come on, Jeremy, if you do this, all the other boys are doing it. They just don't tell you, right? Now, this must have been his strategy. Oh, I dare you to do this. Oh, we could be really good friends if you do that. That must have been his strategy. Now, I can't remember entirely all the grooming process and how powerful it is, right? Because if you're grooming a child, you don't want there to be anything alarming. You want it to be slow and gradual so they don't even realize what's happening. Because if there's anything alarming, there's a chance that that young child is going to say something to someone. You know, something didn't feel right, something hurt, something went wrong the other day with that man. Like, they don't want any of that. So, yes, it's very difficult for the general public to understand how this can happen, how you can get a child to do things like this with you, why the child isn't saying anything. How does it even happen in disguise? How does it even get past all the adults that are around the situation? Like, there are many reasons why that is, and I hope that I've explained some of them.
Exactly. I mean, as you said, they kind of hide it as a form of love, don't they? And as you've said, being an 8-year-old, I was 7 when it happened to me. You don't know the difference. You don't know what it is, obviously, and they're kind of telling you that they're doing it for those reasons. And of course, you go along with it because you're
you do. You're a child.
No wiser, are you? Yeah.
Your reality is what adults have created for you around you. Right. So you can take any situation like that, right? So you could even let's take wealth as an example, right? So a child living in a home where the income is above £1 million a year, right? They'll think that's normal. They don't know anything else outside of that, right? But then you've got your other family home where the child is growing up and they're on benefits or on welfare, and it's like trying to make each pound meet at the end of the month. They don't know anything different either. Then you put this child that's been groomed into a sexual situation and it's been going on for a couple of years. They don't know any different either. So it starts to become your norm, and you don't have the maturity at young ages to question the world around you. You're not developed yet to do that.
No, I agree. I totally agree. And it's just like I was 14, so I was much older, but I wasn't educated. I wasn't back in the day. I didn't know. When I was getting told I was going to be the next superstar and football star, I thought, oh God, because my parents didn't believe me at the time that I was going to be good. And then when I never got things like chicken and chips bought for me and sweets, so he was just like, yeah, this guy's just being nice. But then eventually he made his move. So I totally get it, and I totally respect that. And unfortunately, I don't know what's your view though, Jeremy, on it, of why I know people know it happens. Why do you believe people still have that attitude of saying, so why didn't you say something? Do you think it's education or ignorance?
I think it's
education.
And I think I would always say, even though that invokes an emotion, a negative emotion of frustration, anger, and sadness in the person that's receiving that comment, why didn't you say anything? Why is it taking you so long to actually say it? It couldn't have been that bad. Like, there's a lack of education and information, from the general public, because this is never spoken about. Right? Why didn't you say anything at the time? Is because they don't actually understand the complexities, right, of what's going on. Like let's say my situation, your situation, Kieran, we were quite different ages, and we were tricked and groomed and persuaded and manipulated, and people can't understand that because they haven't experienced it.
No, I understand that. I do understand that, and I do believe there is a real lack of education, especially our generation, and etc. Because, as you say, if we all on this screen look back at schools. I can't remember ever getting spoken about sexual abuse or harassment and what signs to look for, etc. So yeah, I totally get that, and I don't blame many people out there of what happened to me, and mine went on for nearly about a year of being bought stuff and stuff like that. Obviously, now we're talking about it, we probably look at the signs and think, nah, now we can see the signs, but that's because we've gone through it. So just take us back to, obviously, you've gone through those 2 years, and again, I'm so sorry you had to go through all that. When did you realise that it was wrong?
I think when I started getting with girls, let's say my first kiss, my first touch, my first hookup with a girl, early teenage years, going through puberty, that's like my world now. Girls are like my world. Like, it's all about speaking about girls with the boys, like trying to get your first kiss at a party, all of that. And when I started going through those stages, I started thinking, this isn't the first time I've done this.
Yeah.
That's no good. But, let's say I'm 14 at that age, at that time. That is a flash thought. I'm under no level of development or maturity to handle that thought, right? That is a flash thought and it's gone. And then that's it. Like, something maybe in my brain unconsciously is happening. It's come to the forefront, but it's flashed out again. But then when I'm 18, now I'm turning into a man, and now I'm having sex with girls, and now the odd thing during sex will trigger me, give me a quick flashback.
Yeah. I said this to Gary the other day.
And then that flash thought is here again, but now I'm 18. I don't want to deal with that. You know, we're cool. Like, I've got good mates. We're out partying. We're hooking up with girls. Like we're having a good time. Like, that's a flash thought come in and it's gone again.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't actually until I was 25 that I actually started properly dealing with the past. And that came in the form of memories that wouldn't leave me alone, that made me feel really sad. And it just felt like now they were around to stay. And so that was just like this progression. At the time it was happening back at 8 years old, 10 years old, I didn't think it was wrong. There was nothing like, oh my God, I better tell someone. That wasn't even a thought. It was just, I did this thing with this man that I didn't do with anyone else. It was our secret. And it actually felt quite nice sometimes. Yeah. You know, when he'd play with my bits, when there was oral sex involved, and when I was receiving it, that made my genitals feel warm and tingly. You know, I've got a penis. I'm a human being, right? I couldn't distinguish that the person that's doing it to me was incorrect, and that I'm of the age where we shouldn't be doing this. I didn't know any of those rules.
Exactly.
I just got a good sensation.
No, of course, and you ain't going to know, like you say, you're right. You ain't going to think of anything else. You're just going to think, oh, this is enjoyable, and I'm getting looked after. So I totally relate to that. Carrie, have you got any questions before we ask the next?
No, I was just going to say. So, how did you? What were the feelings that kind of came through your mind when you realised, when you did actually get to that point? Because I know from my own thing that happened to me, that I felt a lot of shame about it, and I think that's probably because I didn't tell anybody. I told one person when I was 17, and then didn't mention it again until 2 years ago. And then it kind of came out to my parents and all of that sort of stuff. But I know that I did through more of my adult life than through my childhood, the guilt and the shame of like, how could I let them do that? And the fact that they'd done that to me, and what other people would feel towards me, the fact that had happened. I think that was a big obstacle for me to try and get my head around.
I think when these memories were coming back strong at 25, I felt a level of frustration, because I was like, why now? Like, we've been good all of this time, you know, this hasn't bothered us all of this time. Like, I'd never forgotten about it ever. Like, you know, something would come up on the news, Jimmy Savile case. Somebody would make a joke about it or say something in passing conversation that would remind me of it, but I just didn't care. I also, at this point, had a great career. Like, I was an engineer working in the aircraft industry. I had been very successful at quite a few companies, and I'd moved over to the car industry. I was aiming for Formula One. I was a designing like mechanical design engineer. So like, my life was going tremendously well. So I was annoyed when these memories came, because I thought to myself, if this is weird, because this is different to how it has been before. These don't seem to be going anywhere. And I think I knew in the back of my mind that possibly I may have to address this, and that's going to disrupt everything. That's going to disrupt absolutely everything that I've set up. And I didn't want to go there.
No,
and I think anger and frustration is probably some of the emotions that I felt.
Yeah. It's hard, isn't it? Because you feel like, sorry, go on.
No, go on.
I was just going to say, it kind of feels like a whole can of worms will open if you start to go down that route, and then the fear of what's going to come up and how you're going to deal with it, and all of that sort of stuff. I know from my point of view, as I say, it was just to hold it in for pretty much 40 years. I'm quite old now, and to kind of keep all that in and not say anything, you know, is such a massive thing. But again, it was the fear. I think from a very young age, I kind of portray it as though it was put in a little box, and I locked the key, and then I threw away the key, and I never revisited it again. And even now, even in my 40s, I've healed a lot of my previous stuff, but more so probably my adulthood stuff that happened, because I was in toxic relationships and domestic abuse because of what had happened to me as a child. And even now, as I say, it doesn't affect me in my everyday life now. I feel like I'm in a really good place. But I often think to myself, should I go back and try and unpack all of that sort of stuff? So it's difficult, isn't it, to know whether just leave well alone, I'm all right at the moment, or whether to go back.
Yeah. And I think that's a tough decision to make, because if you go back and start opening everything up, you are opening more cans of worms, aren't you?
Yeah.
But then a lot of people will be in the thought of that needs to happen. The box analogy you gave is actually very interesting, because I've heard that before from people who have used that as an analogy before, that if something traumatic happens to you in your childhood, you are not at a stage of life where you can deal with that. You could never make sense of that. So you do put it in a box, lock the box up and put it to the back of your mind. And then when you get to an age of development that you can start handling those memories, because you have to handle them one day, your brain will cleverly start bringing that box to the front of your mind, just start giving you a bit of what happened. So I've heard that analogy before. Yeah.
When you got older, so with me, like, did the images feel more fresh, like you was there again the older you got? Because with me, like last year, as early as last year, they were as strong as ever. Like, and I could remember the smells, the taste, the colour of the sofa, his aftershave and stuff like that. Did you find that as well?
Yeah, I think I'm not sure if it's got stronger, but I definitely have the same thing. I can feel the atmosphere in the room, like you say. I can remember his skin tone. I can remember what his hands look like. I can remember that taste, that touch, that feel, and like I can remember it like it was yesterday.
Yeah.
And when I tried to prosecute him, it was during my police statement that we actually went into all of this, because I'd never spoken about it up until the police statement, like the graphic nature of it, because the police obviously need to know as much information as they can, so they're digging for info. And yeah, I mean, I could describe it all as far as like emotion and senses. I could describe it all.
No, again, I can relate massively. So take us back. Obviously, you've going through all those ages. You've 18. You've got a bird. You've got kisses and stuff like that. You've eventually. When was the moment you actually, obviously, passed it to?
1 second. 1 second.
Go on.
Okay, sorry. Ask your question again.
When was the moment you actually thought, right, now I need to deal with it. Now I need to talk about it?
So when the memories came back at 25, my strategy actually was just keep pushing them away. This has got to be a phase, right? This has got to be a phase. Just keep pushing them away, and eventually they're going to disappear. Now, I tried this for 2 years. It doesn't work. Gets worse. Memories turn into flashbacks, turn into night terrors. I'm waking myself up in the middle of the night, having the same dream that I'm back in that position. And I was like, this has got so bad. You should do something about this. Like, you should tell one of your mates. Like, that would be a good idea.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't know where that idea came from, because I wasn't following anybody on social media that talks about abuse. Abuse was not a conversation in my friendship group, but it just felt like a strong idea. Now, I tried a number of times to do it. And these are boys that I'd known since my first day at school, my new school, when I was 7 years old. So I'm now 27. So I'd known some of these lads for 20 years. So it's not like I didn't trust them with the information. But I kept trying to do it, but I just literally couldn't get the words out. I kept putting it off. I was like, now's not the right time. No, actually, this is a stupid idea. And you know what? I think one of the big reasons for that is because I know as soon as I say something, not only does that relationship change because they know something about me that's deep, it doesn't change. In fact, it grows stronger. But from my side, it felt like that's just going to change. The dynamic's going to change dramatically. But also, I feel like I knew as soon as I break that secret and that silence, if I'm like, oh, actually, I want to backtrack, you can't.
Yeah.
Everything changes forever. And I think that's one of the reasons why it just felt so difficult to get these words out to one of my mates. But eventually I did it. And we were just in the pub. And I said to my mate, who I'd known since 7 years old, now 27, 20 years. So he'd known me 1 year before the abuse and through the abuse and all the years after. So he'd known me all of this time. Now, look, I said to him, mate, you are never going to believe what happened to me when I was younger. And like, he could have guessed 1,000 times. He would have never got anywhere close. And I told him, we spoke through the story. He supported me incredibly well, gave me an incredible response. I will be forever thankful to him. And he doesn't even realize how powerful his response was. He was just behaving in the way he was just reacting to a very shocking story, because that actually gave me the confidence to continue talking. Like 6 months later, I tell another friend. Then 4 months later, I tell another friend. Then a month later, I tell another. And I just started telling people more quick, like the frequency was increasing, because I started getting more confident with telling the story.
Yeah.
I spoke. It wasn't so much a hurdle anymore.
Did you come across many people that were sort of negative about it, or kind of then decided to retreat from actually being around you and stuff like that? Did you come across that much?
Oh my goodness. I think I'm probably one of the luckiest people. Like I have one of the fortunate journeys, I believe, because the first 30 people that I told, they all gave me incredible responses. Incredible responses.
Wow.
How many mates did I tell over about 3 years period? I reckon I told about 10 of my closest mates. Then I wanted to continue telling people, so I started speaking to their partners, like their girlfriends, their wives. And everybody was just so like I was gauging the reaction. Everybody's like, oh my God, that's crazy. Well done for telling us. This must have been such a difficult thing. You've held this all. They were interested. They're asking me questions. Like, I didn't get a negative response. And my heart goes out to anyone that was not believed, that was asked if they could keep it quiet, was asked, shall we just push this to the side? Was asked, why don't you just forget about this and move on? You know, we talked about education versus ignorance.
Yeah.
I don't know if ignorant is the correct word for what I'm just about to say, but the response of why don't you just forget about it and move on is one that will always anger me.
It angers me. Yeah, it angers me. And with me, like, I'm not too worried of what I say, but I believe it's education, but also ignorance as well. Is because it hasn't happened to them. They never, like you say, they're never going to realise unless it happened to them. And I wish it on to no one, not even my worst enemy. I don't even wish it on to the person who done it to me. Yeah. I don't even wish that. Yeah. It's just the fact. I just want society to actually be more educated and understanding that because of how we are as society, that we are stopping so many people out there speaking of saying this happened to me when I was a child, or it is happening to me now.
Okay.
And that's what it's my anger gets, is where we're stopping. There's a child out there now, unfortunately, probably going through what you went through, and if we society is showing, oh, just park it around a bus, park it around there, forget it, put it under the carpet, that person ain't going to want to come and talk, that child, etc. So I think it's a bit of both in my view. That's just my opinion, though, Jeremy.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be lack of education, a touch of ignorance, and also such fear and disgust that that's happening on our watch. That actually, if you just forget about it and move on, we can just continue looking over here at our amazing lives and not worry about it. Right? But my response is to the person that says that, if your child was sexually abused and you found out that the person that did it to them has been doing this for decades to hundreds more children before they got to your child, you're going to be wondering why all those people that came before your child forgot about it and moved on.
Exactly.
Because if we just continue forgetting about it and moving on, we're not going to do anything about it.
Yep.
And it's just going to continue. And it's only when I put it in your when I turn it around and put it on into your family, that's when you're like, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
We don't want people to forget about it and move on, because then these people live in our communities and continue committing the crime against young children. Look, I with regards to society taking this more seriously, I put out a post this week and I wrote, the first sentence of it was, and it was a picture of me as an 8-year-old boy. And my first sentence was, this boy knew what a penis tastes like.
Yeah.
Is that hard for you to hear? ? Well, it should be, because if we don't start doing something about this, this is going to continue. And I wrote it, and there was a huge response to it. But I speak to a lot of my friends about the content that I put out there. They're following closely. And a number of them were like, okay, that was different. That was different, because you forced me to actually think of the reality of this. And you worded it in a way that I couldn't get away from. Because when you write, I was 8 years old, I was sexually abused, everyone's like, that's horrific.
Yeah.
I'm so sad for you. But if I tell you actually what it is, how horrifying, how horrific this is, when you think of an adult and a child, an adult and a young teenager, like, I've got to give you the visual for you to take it seriously. And that's what that post was all about.
I must admit,
credit to you. That post was amazing, to be fair. When I did see it, I was like, it's kind of the things what we've probably wanted to say for ourselves, but I thought, credit to you, mate. You had it. Sorry, Carrie. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, because I volunteer as well. I'm a trauma ambassador for another charity, and I've kind of said the same thing, that it has to be something that really, really hits you in order for people to actually stop and think. Because, as you say, if you just skirt around the issue, you might say the words, but to everybody at the audience that are listening in, that's all it is to them. They're not actually going to take any action or want to help or make a change in any way. And I applaud you for literally just coming out and saying it, because I think that's definitely what's needed in the world, because otherwise people will just push it under the carpet and it won't change. And and I think it's just amazing, like you say, to be that hard hitting, because it has to be, in order, people have to have an emotional response to that.
Yes. Post of the year, you're winning.
I'll be keeping
it. Brilliant. It was brilliant.
Engaging the reaction to posts, and I'll be keeping that one, and I'll post it a few more times as the years go on. I've got a collection of posts that I know are pretty either insightful, educational, or hard hitting, or written well, and I just keep them in a library, and I just really post them as the years go on. So just to continue on this point, I wonder what your feelings on trigger warnings are, because I don't use trigger warnings on any of my content, and my current reasoning for that is, if I stand any chance of getting this subject onto people's tables who never really think about it a lot, when they're relaxing, scrolling through their social media on a Thursday evening with a glass of wine, if I've got trigger warning in front of child sexual abuse at the start of my video,
they're not reading it.
No.
I've got no chance.
We started it.
I've got no chance anyway, because you get like under a second of people's attention to stay on your post. You've got to grab them straight away. If I put that trigger warning at the start of my video, they're going straight past it, and they may be the parents that need to know about it.
Exactly. We started with trigger warnings at the start of this journey of podcast. I think it was my story, episode 1. We're like 30, 40 episodes in that. But literally after that, I make it right. I dropped it. I don't do no trigger warnings. I do say, listen, if you get upset with what you hear, message me, and we can help get you support. But you're totally right. They're the ones who you want to make the attention to and educate. So totally respect that. Totally do.
I understand the flip side of that discussion, and that is that you are going to upset a few people, in particular the people that have been through it. If they come across your content, they're not ready for it that evening, and they've had a history of this themselves, you are going to trigger them and leave them feeling a little unsettled. But I'm damned if I do, damned if I don't.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I must admit, I've got a Facebook group with some members in there, and I would put trigger warnings if it was anything really, really quite explicit for them, because obviously at the moment they're going through it, and it's a private group just for that. But I do agree, generally, if you're just putting it out to the world, that actually, it's going to hinder you rather than getting that word out, isn't it?
Oh my God, the amount of parents that have messaged me, honestly, and said, I come across your work through this avenue. I've never really thought about that before. And I'm like, oh my God, we're like, how have you never thought about this before? But it's true. It like, I don't know if there's a bigger taboo on a subject than this one.
I think this is the biggest. Yeah, I think this is the biggest. I believe this is the biggest.
So of course there are parents out there that have never really thought about this.
So when you go into schools and things, obviously, I'm assuming you have to tone it down a little bit. So how do you find that? Obviously, because I can see how passionate you are about it, and obviously you want it to go in and you want people to be taking it seriously. So how do you kind of draw the line and sort of have a mixture of both? So
I obviously cater for, I obviously amend my presentation for the different age groups. But when I'm speaking with the adults, the first half of my presentation is storytelling. And then the second half, we talk through preventative ideas. And because I don't have all the answers, right? So it's a discussion. It's an exchange of ideas. So that's the second half. Now, the first half of the story, I try to take them on a journey. And I do give them a few spikes of like, oh, cool. Oh, you can see it in the audience. They're like, oh, but then, I've blended a mixture of adventure, inspiration, and the story of abuse. And so I take them on a journey. So I do give them a few hard-hitting bits. Now, there are two parts to my story that I run through, that I wondered when I started getting booked for the younger ages, whether I should leave out of my story, because they're 12-year-olds, they're 15-year-olds, they're 17-year-olds. And those two parts were the reaction that I got from my parents when I told them, which is, it's ripped their lives apart. In fact, my dad is no longer alive. And that's why the introduction of this hit so hard. He spiraled out of control once he found out what had happened. The second part of the story is, I actually went and knocked on this man that did this to me. I went and knocked on his door in 2019 following a failed prosecution attempt against him. And I got arrested for doing that. And he took me to court. Now, those two parts of the story, I wondered whether I should leave out when I'm talking to the kids, because I don't want to discourage anybody from telling their parents. The knocking on the door part, I am definitely not endorsing anyone going knocking on anybody's door, right? So, I don't want no 15-year-old lad in there that's like, yeah, fuck that, I'm doing that as well. I don't need that. And that's not what I'm not.
Of course.
Right? So I put a post out on my social media and asked my audience, what do you reckon? I reckon I got about 200 comments. Not one person said, pull those two bits. They said, keep them in there because it's real.
Yeah, exactly.
Obviously explain about the parents disclosing to parents that, of course, your parents are going to feel pain through this. This is not what they wanted. Obviously every situation is slightly different, right? But to explain the reality of the response of my parents, and just to let them know that this is real life. And then the knocking on the door part, I pushed strongly. I was 32 years old when I did that. I've now got a criminal record. It's going to affect any future jobs that I've got. Don't go doing that. I always say that. But people were like, no, you've got to grip them.
Yeah.
Right. And you've got to grip them into the narrative, because they'll be sitting there and they'll be looking around and they'll be like, oh, I wonder when this guy's going to finish talking. Like, oh, I wish I was on Instagram. Like, I don't want that. I'm trying to grip them into a narrative and get them to take this seriously. And it's so funny. I spoke to a group of year 11 boys recently. It was at boys' school. So I introduced what I'm talking about. And there's someone in the background that made a little joke with their mates, right? I remember what it was like at that age.
Yeah.
About with my mates, trying to make everyone laugh. So someone's doing that in the corner there. Then I continue talking and I talk a little bit about the abuse, and like someone else has set off and they're having a little joke and a little laugh there, the lads. But then as soon as I start talking about going after this guy, everything starts to change. Because now they're like, oh, I start talking about knocking on his door, and they're like, you can see them, they're nearly out of their seat by this point. And then I've got a group of lads who were not taking this seriously at the start to taking this seriously. And they are often the ones in the Q&A part of my presentation that ask the serious questions. Because we're trying to get the young people involved in taking this seriously. And whether they've been through abuse or not, at the very least, I've given them something to think about and a memorable story for them to move forward with if they ever come into this situation.
And I think as well, like, you know, talking to boys of that age as well, obviously it's good that you're being out there and you're saying obviously it happens to boys, because a lot of abuse and stuff is more related to women, or people perceive it as being that. So the fact that obviously you're another male that's going into a school where there's other boys and all of that sort of stuff, and also giving them, as you say, putting it in their minds so that they look out for the signs for their peers and things like that as well.
Younger brothers, younger sisters.
Exactly.
But let me add a thought for you there. You know, there's various statistics going on around. So let's say it's 1 in 10 children experience something like this. So I'm definitely speaking to at least one boy at that school that's been through something, but I'm also speaking to at least one boy that will turn into an abuser in the future. That's something we never think about, really. Right? Exactly. There are offenders. When I go into these schools, even the mixed schools, boys and girls, right? There are people who will be victims to this crime, but there are also there are future criminals who I'm speaking to. And who knows who I could possibly make twice when they're 20 years old and they're thinking about doing something like this.
No, and again, like that's one of the reasons I want to go in schools as well, is just hopefully we can, and I think, I believe you will. I believe you might have already done that. Maybe made someone think, hang on, is this what actually it is? Is this, because I'm not defending anyone who does that, but some of them do believe it's the norm that I can touch up a 12-year-old or 8-year-old, and people think that's just a normal thing. That side of that people might actually benefit from you talking to them, and whoever else going to schools to feel actually it's wrong. What am I doing? Slow down here, stop, take a seat back. So again, I believe you've probably already prevented something. And again, my hat goes off to you. Just to quickly go back to your story, sorry, Jeremy, and then to talk about, and then before we talk about what you do now and your mission is, so obviously you've gone through, you're telling the police, at the time you're telling the police, how did the police make you feel? And obviously you mentioned just now that your dad, unfortunately, I'm really sorry about his passing. If you're happy to discuss that bit as well, of how it made your family, your mum and dad especially, and the police, how did it all unravel?
So my prosecution attempt against the man, the police were extremely supportive. They couldn't do enough. I felt like they were working 24/7 on this.
Wow.
They kept asking if I was all right during my statement. They were trying to give me as much support, but they also, the officer that was dealing with my statement, he couldn't stop apologizing, because he said, we used to have 2 officers in this room, one taking care of your well-being and one and the other one asking the questions to you. But after recent government funding cuts, we only have enough money now for 1 officer. Right. And I felt like they kept me updated throughout the process. Yes, the process took a year. It shouldn't take a year, right? It shouldn't take a year, but it took a year. They put him under voluntary arrest, asked him to come to the station. Of course, he denied it. Who's admitting to this? No one. It would wreck your life. You're going all the way denying it, trying to get away with it. And in the end, there wasn't enough evidence. The case had to be closed because the police cannot take every case to court. They can only take the cases that stand a chance of prosecution, because there's not enough money in the pot.
No. I relate the same thing. Like the Sapphire team were amazing with me. The Cat team haven't been that amazing, but the Sapphire team, the lady Emma Rolfe, and if you ever listen to Emma, a legend lady, she said similar comments literally about cuts, and it was just me and her on the sofa in this little room. And the saddest thing though was they found out where this man was, but then found out that it's happened to another 2 people after me, which was, I went through a mental stage of just like thinking I could have prevented that, etc. But how did it make you feel when you're going through that process for a year? How did it make you feel and your mum and dad? Obviously, your mum and dad are involved now. Obviously, no.
And they had to get involved because the case was looking weak halfway through the investigation. And like questions like, how often was he round? How often would he stay around? Where was he? I can't answer any of those questions. I don't know those. So only they could. And honestly, they'll never recover.
No.
They'll never recover.
I suppose for them, isn't it? It's like they didn't protect you.
Right, that's the only result of it.
Yeah.
They trusted this man. They brought him into the house. How did they not see it? How could they not protect their little boy? It will always be their fault. And my dad spiraled out of control. When we cleaned my dad's room up, there was a picture of this man in his bedside drawer.
Oh, no.
So he must have, when it got too much for him, I'm guessing he's pulled that picture out and tried to offload.
Yeah.
You know? And so, you know, I'm pretty sure my mum, in fact, my mum probably never doesn't have a morning where she wakes up thinking about this. But to make it worse in this sense, she can't get away from it because she's following me on social media. So she sees it all the time. And I do report on the highs and I do also report on the lows. For example, YouTube demonetizing my channel most recently. And I write about those things, and they're like, you know, I got cancelled. A school cancelled one of my bookings when I sent them through my DBS because I've got a conviction on there for knocking on his door. So I do post these things, and it probably breaks her heart even more so than it's already broken.
Yeah.
And so I did say to her, you know, it could be an idea for you to unfollow me. You know, it could be. But she's like, no, I want to be here along for the journey. So all credit to her, you know. So with the police thing, I actually have just 2 days ago interviewed a police officer that spent a whole career on the child abuse investigation team. His name's Mike Brewer. And he spoke about the job doing that, how that is interviewing paedophiles and interviewing the children that have been abused. And there's different techniques, you know, quite obviously there's going to be different techniques in how to interview those 2 people and how it felt to do that job, because we cut the police down. You know, that's all I see. I only see us cutting the police down through this. But what I say is you try doing that job.
Oh, no, of course, yeah.
You try waking up every morning, interviewing these kids, watching videos and images that the criminals made of them to try to get a prosecution. Like, there's bad apples in every job, right?
Yeah.
You know, there's bad people. And I want to try and encourage the police. And that's actually one of the missions of my work, to encourage the people that are helping with the prevention of this.
So how did you get over the fact that obviously, as we know, we were talking about society earlier, and obviously this man has done that to you. He's walked away scot-free. Then the moment you try to take the law in your own hands, obviously it's you then obviously that gets arrested and all the rest of it. Like, how did that make you feel at the time? I mean, I can imagine you were extremely angry, but how do you kind of get over that? Because obviously that is a massive thing now that's now hindering you in your life because of the conviction that you've got because of that.
So I would say when the case got closed, when my prosecution attempt against him got closed, I felt lost. Because one of the reasons why I prosecuted is because I started reading statistics of how many victims these people have in their lifetime. And I thought, I am definitely not the first, and I am definitely not the last.
No.
So that's why I tried to prosecute him. And then when that got closed, I felt lost because I was like, well, what do I do now? Then I go confront him, tell him everything that I want to tell him at the door, get arrested. And once I'd done that and he'd taken me to court, actually after the court day, I felt relieved because I felt like I'd told him everything that I could. And I felt like at the very least, I've sent a shiver up his spine if he's still doing this to more children. And that is all I can do. And actually, that was kind of my way. Once that had happened, I was able to put that to the side. We explored that the best we could. I pushed it the best I could for 2.5 years. Now I'm going to have to focus on my work, and that's a way I can push for prevention.
Yeah. Can I just ask as well, because something that I'd seen that you'd posted a little while ago was the fact that nobody talks about when it's a child sexually abusing another child.
Yeah,
because that is something that happened to me,
right.
and it almost felt as though it wasn't taken quite so seriously because it was another child, even though from my point of view the effects would have been the same as it would as if it had been an adult. But like it's really hard to get people's head around it. And I remember when I first told somebody not that long ago, and their first reaction was, oh, well, what must he have had done to him?
Right.
And so immediately, although I get now, I've kind of processed what was said and how I feel about it. But initially I was very much like, well, I don't care what he thinks, what happened to him, because he's put that on me.
Yeah, I think
and I felt like it was almost trivialised a little bit because it was another child. He was only
I
like 4
think
years
it's a
older
very
than me.
interesting point you make, and I've never actually thought about it from that angle. And I think that's because society have empathy for a child that's committing a crime, because we think, oh, they're only a child, they don't really know what they're doing. And there's a truth in that. However, we mustn't forget that there's still a victim there.
Exactly.
Yeah. And regardless on how the abuse is coming to that victim, the intensity that the victim feels is the same. And maybe that's something we need to talk about more.
Yeah.
Again, another one, this peer-on-peer abuse or children abusing children, it's another one that people don't think about.
I think the thing is as well, one thing that has come to my mind sort of over the last couple of years as well, now I'm being more vocal about it, is obviously I don't know whether he's actually done it to anybody else since. I mean, for all I know, he could have carried that on in his adulthood. I wouldn't be any the wiser, and I have the same thing as you. And because I hadn't reported it as well at the time, obviously, because I didn't really realise that I could or I had to even. But obviously to go back and do it now, to me, it's like, well, it's not going to get me anywhere, because obviously I'm going to go through all that turmoil, and they're just going to say there's no evidence, and then that will be that. But obviously, equally, I think you do have that almost like guilt feeling to think, but if I could have prevented it for somebody else. And I think that's really quite hard to kind of get your head around, isn't it? The fact that 100%. They could be out there and doing it and have hundreds of people that, if not thousands of people, who knows, that they've done it to and ruined their lives as well.
And that is a guilt to feel. And that's because it's actually factual, because if we all reported on the day we got abused and they all got locked up or got put on the offenders register, they wouldn't be able to do it. So it is facts. But I'm not trying to put the ownership on anyone. It's not a victim's responsibility to. So, but the guilt is there. It's real.
Yeah. And just, so obviously case, nothing, unfortunately no evidence and stuff. And again, really sorry what happened to your father. Really am. So then talk to us your mission. Then obviously you're still going through in your mind. But then what made you do what you do now? And talk to us, what is your mission at the end goal?
So I now have dedicated my life to raising awareness in the best ways that I possibly can. I left my engineering career in 2019, January 2019, and decided that I was just going to go full steam ahead with this. I literally have committed everything to it, and I'm trying to continue to build platforms. I run a movement called Something to Say. That's a separate platform from my Jeremy Indika platform. You can go check that out. It's under all social media platforms, Something to Say Official. And we are sharing people's stories there, because I got so much confidence through sharing mine and got so much benefit through sharing mine. I just wanted to open a platform for others to do so. So we are receiving submissions from all over the world, from all different ages, and we're sharing people's stories. And what's beautiful about that platform, in the 18 months it's been running, is now people have started submitting poetry, art. They've started writing articles for us, and actually all the content that you see on there is community driven. I've now slowly building a team of people that are helping me with all of this work.
I was just going to ask you that, actually, because I think, gosh, you must have so much to do. Like, how would you ever do that on your own? There must be a massive team behind you.
You know, because I'm already working too much. I don't want this to be the long-term plan. Like, I'm working constantly, and I'm trying to build a team of people to help me with all of these different things. I've just recently launched some new clothing, Something to Say clothing. And what's phenomenal about that clothing is none of it says child abuse. None of it says abuse prevention. It's just got some slogans on there that are quite powerful. It's got some designs on there that are quite powerful, because I always had the idea when I started this of giving something to people, for people to wear, that made them feel strong and empowered in public without feeling fearful of people judging what t-shirt they're wearing. That also helps with income, because obviously if I've got a team of people, I need to pay people, right? So one of the big questions when I was about 2 years into this, I'm 4.5 years into this now, 2 years in, a lot of my mates were like, you're spending all your savings from your engineering career. Like, how are you going to make any money out of this? And it is still the target. So I receive donations through my website from people who support the work. I sell t-shirts and hoodies. We're also just about to kick off a Patreon. I don't know if you know about Patreon, but it may help in your journey as well. Patreon. People can support monthly subscriptions. Just watch a few YouTube videos. You'll learn a bit about that. Very powerful package. And we're trying to make things run. I get paid for my speaking events, obviously, so that generates an income. And I just want to create something so phenomenal with all of this. My big goal, TV drama on Netflix.
Can I just ask you, actually, like, how when you with all your videos, I think they're brilliant. Like, who helps you with that, or do you do it yourself, or you know, how do you go around making them so good?
So it's all people. As my content started to grow online, people start messaging me. I'd love to help.
Wow.
And then you're like, okay, cool. What skills you got? Maybe they'll volunteer for a couple of months, and then they've done their thing. But the guy who made the film that you two were talking about with the opening scene of them two playing football, that was a guy that I met on the bus. So I met on the bus. I'd just done a speaking event, and we just got chatting. I think we got stuck in roadwork traffic, and we just got chatting, same age as me, a little bit younger. And I was like, yeah, I just done a speaking event. I do this child abuse prevention stuff. He was like, oh, that's phenomenal. I'd love to get your Instagram. I'm a filmmaker. I was like, okay.
Yeah, you're my mate, huh? No, to be fair, and I love the process. It's just really nice to hear your journey so far and what your mission is, because I think it's kind of, obviously, I don't want to stand on your toes, but it's kind of similar of what my mission is. And I believe in where you are in the country, where I am in the country, and where other people around the world on the same kind of wavelength. If together we can, and not against each other, together we can echo our messages in our each locations, we can hopefully save someone from being abused or for speaking. And it's just really interesting to know your journey, because we're only, and I keep forgetting, Carrie keeps literally need to slap me around the face sometimes and say, Kieran, you're only 8 weeks in, because sometimes I want things to happen now. And it's just the way you've met people is similar how we've met, because I've met Kerry through this. I've met two other ladies and a man behind the scenes who's focusing on TikTok now through this. And it's just like, it just makes me smile that that's how your journey started, and now, because your content's amazing. So hopefully one day we can get there.
Don't ever get rid of that. Don't ever get rid of that. I want everything. I want to be here now. Don't ever get rid of that. That's your hunger. You know, that's your hunger. Obviously, you've got to settle yourself now and again. And I feel I have the same thing. I'm still like it. My missus is like, you need to calm down sometimes. And I'm like, yeah. And what I do is, now and again, in particular, if I'm feeling like I'm not getting anywhere with this, even though I know I am, but you know, you get in that bad.
You get those bad days,
I'm not going to go anywhere. How am I going to? You just need to scroll through your thing and look at your first post, which was 8 weeks ago. I go to this time last year. And I'm like, I was writing everything differently. I was communicating completely differently. And you see the growth, like the fact you've been doing this 8 weeks. Oh, that's phenomenal.
No, thank you. And it's, to be fair, we do see the growth. Like if you watch episode 1, you cringe. You cringe. Like it's my episode, but I'm hiding behind the camera. It's just my audio, and because I was too scared to come on camera. But you listen to how I spoke then, and I thought, and then my first podcast, you think, right, this guy ain't gonna last, and you. And now it's scary. It's cringy to watch back. I don't like watching myself back.
But it's useful.
Yeah, exactly. So I love your mission. I love everything about it, Jeremy. Obviously, in a way, the way I look at life is we've gone through. Maybe we've had to go through these things to do what we do now in life. And the positive for me, I'm grateful that I've been able to meet, obviously, Gary, the team behind me, and brilliant guests like yourself, Jeremy. So, again, anything and everything we can link up or I can support you with, help push anything out there for you, whatever. Just call me, text Gary, whoever it is. I'm with you all the way, mate. Before we do end, though, I just want to give you the floor to discuss everything that you feel you need to let people know about what you do or your story.
Don't shy away from this topic. It's the most horrific crime that we have on our hands, and it's the crime that we don't want to happen to any children. We all have children in our family. We have children ourselves. Friends have children. Or if none of that applies to you, you're a child once upon a time. This is a horrific crime. We must stop it from happening. And it is possible. We just need to make noise and be brave. And that is the final words from me. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just Carrie, any last words? There's a few questions. I've got a few questions people commenting on, so I will shout them out. But Carrie, you first.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say how amazing it is. I was so looking forward to today because I just, sort of watching what you're doing, I just think it's absolutely amazing, and it's definitely something that is needed out there. And like Kieran said, I'm sure we'd love to have you back at some point and to sort of elaborate a bit more and give us an update on what you're doing. And definitely, I'd love for us all to keep in contact and
fantastic.
Get that communication going. That'd be brilliant.
Yeah. Well, I'm a bit upset. Carrie never wants to come on a podcast, so at least she rushed home today for you, Jeremy. Don't be nicking my PA. You're not going nowhere. I need you.
The funny thing is, though, is that I wouldn't have even come on a podcast 3 weeks ago. So
bless you.
Thanks to
she wouldn't.
He got me on there, and I was like, I need to get over this. Now he can't get me off of it. It'll be
good on you to both of you.
Yeah. So just a few comments, or just quite a few. So someone has put, I was 8 when it happened to them. Unfortunately, I can't see the names on my side until I've logged off. So Angela. And people think it was right at 8. She thought it was the norm. So echoing similar what you discussed, Jeremy. My mate's mum watched and slapped me not to tell my mum. I remember his jeans and buckle. I see him for years and become that 8-year-old again. I used to sit on the pensioners and men's sat on their laps and cuddle them, and I think that they were predators. I felt I was to blame. I remember it as a mum. My daughter said, "Oh, mummy, I go around that old man's house for sweets." I flipped. He may have been innocent. Then my caretaker started sending her flowers, bouquets. I reported him, as that's not right. I find it hard to trust. It's class when we're talking about taboo and stuff. Someone's put it's class as taboo. No more now. Well done to this group. Thank you. And also well done, massive to Jeremy's movement and other people out there. It stays with you for life, which I could have spoke before when I told my mum she had to do when I went Tenerife. Well done. I'm okay now to talk. I'm not going to be a victim anymore. And make it right. And credit to anyone who's having that attitude now. Don't be a victim. You don't have to be a victim. There's people like Jeremy out there, ourselves, and many others that will guide you and support you in some ways. As a mother, I wish I would support my son, even if it hurts me. You're all amazing. Carrie, you were a child. It's not your fault if he done it. So I'm guessing that was about your topic, about your conversation. Jeremy, you are an example of strength and resilience. And I'll make that right. We should all be working together, not against each other. Someone's commented 8 weeks only, a safe space between us. And I'm listening in, I can't say that word. In awe. I'm listening in awe. So again, to be fair, I'm really shocked because 4 p.m. here, obviously, where we are in the UK, it's usually mummies picking up school kids and talking about it. But we've had quite a lot of people talking already, and again, like, I really want to say thank you so much, Jeremy, for taking the time to comment on the safe space between us, even though we're not that big as of yet, and whatever. But I think you're an inspiring person. You inspire me. And again, I hope we do keep in touch. And if there's anything we can ever help you with, please do message and shout, mate.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you for inviting me on. I just enjoy these conversations. So please, towards next year, give me a shout and we'll chat again, because we've only just scratched the surface of the topic. So fantastic.
No, cool. No, cool. So on that note, I want to say thank you to Kerry. Kerry, goodbye.
Thank you, Kerry.
Thank you. Nice to meet you, Jeremy.
Thank you.
And Jeremy, once again, I want to say thank you on behalf of the safe space between us and anyone out there. I believe this podcast, we will get people talking and make change. So again, keep doing what you're doing. You've got my support 100%. So thank you so much.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. And guys, I've been your host, Kieran. This has been the safe space between us. I'll see you soon. Take care.